Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've always loved gardening. There's just something so relaxing about getting your hands dirty, nurturing seeds into beautiful flowers, and watching your yard transform into a little oasis. When my husband and I bought our first house last year, I was over the moon to finally have a garden of my own. The previous owners had let the yard go, so I had my work cut out for me. But I didn't mind. I spent weeks ripping up overgrown weeds, turning over soil, and planning my dream garden. I decided on a cottage garden style, with informal flower beds bursting with bright blossoms. I envisioned it being a welcoming sanctuary for birds, bees, and butterflies. After months of hard work, my garden started taking shape. I planted all sorts of flowers: daisies, lilies, lavender, sunflowers. I wanted a joyful riot of colors and textures. Whenever I watered my garden or deadheaded spent blooms, I felt a deep sense of pride. This little patch of earth was my happy place. That is, until Helen moved in across the street. I first met her when she marched over and introduced herself as the president of our neighborhood's homeowner association. I politely explained that I wasn't actually part of the homeowner association, but she brushed it off. Everyone on this street is part of the homeowner association, dear. It keeps our neighborhood looking pristine. I'm sure you understand. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I simply nodded and said I looked forward to being neighborly. Over the next few weeks, Helen became a thorn in my side. She nitpicked everything. My mailbox was crooked, my trash cans visible from the street, my car parked too close to the curb. No matter how hard I tried to appease her, it was never enough. One Saturday morning, I was in my front yard, pruning roses, when Helen stormed over, her face pinched in anger. "Just what do you think you're doing?" she demanded. I blinked in confusion. Pruning my roses? No, all those ghastly weeds you've planted. She gestured in disgust at my garden. My hackles rose. You mean the flowers I've been growing? Helen scoffed. Flowers! Don't be silly, those are weeds, through and through. Our homeowner association guidelines strictly prohibit weeds. All yards must be clean and orderly. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Helen, as I've told you before, I'm not part of the homeowner association. I'll plant whatever flowers I please in my own yard. Helen's nostrils flared. The arrogance! How dare you flout our rules so flagrantly? Consider this your first and final warning. Get rid of these weeds or face the consequences. With that, she whirled around and stomped away. I shook my head in disbelief. Clearly there was no reasoning with her. I resolved to simply ignore her crazy demands. This was my yard, my garden, my rules. For a few weeks I lucked out and didn't see hide nor hair of Helen. My garden flourished through spring, erupting in a joyful riot of color. I added some metal butterfly sculptures and an arbor tucked away in a shady corner. Each day working amongst my flowers brought me immense happiness. Then one morning in June, I opened my front door to get the newspaper and was horrified to see an official notice from the homeowner association nailed to my door. According to the letter, I was being fined $50,000 for excessive weed growth violating neighborhood standards. $50,000? For growing flowers? I saw red. This was unbelievable. Helen had lost her damn mind if she thought I was paying a single cent. The letter went on to threaten further action, including putting a lien on my house if I didn't pay the fine and remove the weeds within 2 weeks. Well, if Helen wanted to play hardball, then so be it. I marched straight over to her house and pounded on the door until she answered, scowling. Yes? Helen asked in clipped tones. I got your bogus fine letter, I said, waving the notice in her pinched face. I wanted to tell you in person that I won't be paying a cent. My garden stays. Helen's scowl deepened. You have no respect for authority, do you? I am the president of this homeowner association, and you will do as I say and pay the fine. I stood firm. Let me be clear. I am not, nor will I ever be, part of your stupid homeowner association. You have zero power over what I do on my property. If you try to put a lien on my house, I'll see you in court. I didn't give her a chance to respond before marching back home, fuming. I immediately called my friend Jenny, who also happened to be a real estate attorney. She reassured me that I was in the right, and any liens would be thrown out since I wasn't an homeowner association member. However, she agreed to send Helen an official cease and desist letter on my behalf. Jenny also helped me file harassment complaints against both Helen and the homeowner association board. I collected evidence including photos of my garden, a log of all Helen's frivolous complaints against me, and character statements from other neighbors who were fed up with her tyranny. A few weeks later, I received notice that a hearing had been scheduled with the Homeowner Association Board to address the complaints against Helen and determine if she should be removed as president. Jenny agreed to attend as my representative. The night of the hearing, I waited anxiously at home, pacing around my garden for comfort. Finally, around 9 p.m., I got a triumphant call from Jenny. The board had ruled unanimously to remove Helen as president, effective immediately. Even better, they agreed to dissolve the homeowner association altogether because of her misconduct. I wouldn't be getting any more bogus fines over my flowers. I trenched down to Helen's to deliver the good news in person. She opened the door looking utterly defeated. "Well, I thought you should know the homeowner association has been disbanded," I said politely. Helen just blinked silently. "Anyway, I won't take up more of your time. Have a nice night." I gave her a cheerful wave and sauntered back home, leaving her standing speechless on the doorstep. My garden has continued thriving all summer long, more stunning than ever. It's been wonderful not having Helen around inventing problems. The neighborhood actually feels more harmonious without her nonsense homeowner association rules dividing us. I finally have the peaceful sanctuary I always dreamed of. And nothing makes me happier than strolling my garden each evening, secures in the knowledge that I can grow any flowers I please. The next one is a pro-revenge story. It was 1994 in a chain grocery store with a truly awful manager who was straight out of business school. He was also the regional office director's son, so he was Teflon. Anything that went wrong got pinned on an assistant manager and/or hushed up at the regional level. Awful had managed to install his mistress as one of the assistant managers. I only saw her in the store twice, and both times she was shopping. One of the times she didn't even pay. Awful paid no attention to people's time constraints. We had a bunch of teenagers there who were attending summer school. He didn't care. He scheduled however he wanted and left us to swap shifts among ourselves. I personally saw him tell one girl she'd have to miss school because he needed her on shift and she couldn't find coverage. Crazy illegal. He didn't care about legalities. Awful's belief was that if the computer would accept it, then it was fine. It was the early days of computerized payroll, so the system would take literally anything with no checks. He made the teenagers work hours they legally couldn't. I'm talking too late, too early, and lots of overtime. If they complained, he threatened to fire them. That was his answer to everything, and work wasn't easy to come by in that area. There were teenagers in tears because he wouldn't let them take time for family vacations, or they were being forced to miss tests at school. One guy was fired because he went to his sister's wedding. He'd warned Awful about it months in advance, and it was a holiday weekend, so nobody could swap. Awful was very rarely, if ever, in the store his entire shift. He'd clock in, get the few really important things done, then leave. He'd come back in the middle of his shift to do the bank deposits, then be gone again until it was time to clock out. He assigned all his work to the latest Fall Guy assistant manager or other random employees. If he was the only manager on duty, he'd leave his badge for overrides on the desk in the office so we could grab it when needed to override register errors. All of this was massively against company policy. I mentioned in a previous post how National was pretty obsessed with mystery shopper reports, and got them directly from the company that did that stuff. We'd get all kinds of conflicting instructions because National's edicts based on those and our regional director's policies would differ. Always fun. What I didn't mention was mystery shoppers were trivial to spot. They'd go straight to the bakery to price out a special order cake, then not buy it, complain about the price, or ask any of the normal questions. They also went to the bathroom, the fish counter, asked for a price check, and made us unring something they decided they didn't want during checkout. There were other things on the list, but those are the obvious ones I remember all these years later. My last week at this crap show before I headed back to college, I spotted a blatant mystery shopper complete with a notepad. Awful had bugged out shortly after open. The mistress was probably busy banging him. The other assistant manager had been fired for the last colossal screw-up, and the only other cashier on shift was at lunch. It was pretty dead as it was late morning, so no big deal. Except that I decided it was time for this crap show to get reported for what it was. When Mystery came up with her price check item, I forgot to hit the price check button and rang it up for real. Whoops! Time to go get the manager's override badge. I overrode it. Then I tossed that bad boy so hard it went all the way across the manager's desk and down into the sea of cables behind it in the corner. Whoops! I'm quite sure that if you went to the tapes, this looked incredibly intentional. It was my last week. You could count the fucks I gave on no hands. Somewhere around this time, the other cashier, we'll call her Jenny, got back from her lunch break and I informed her that crap was about to get real. She might want to go home sick if she wanted some cover. Nah, Jenny giggled and wanted a front row seat. Besides, the lunch rush was coming. We had a construction area nearby, and a lot of the guys came for the prepared foods for a cheap hot lunch. We started to get the lunch rush and more of a crowd by the time Mystery made it up to my register to check out. Of course, she needed me to unring something for her checklist, so I flipped on the "Help Me Obi-Wan" light. Nothing happened. I called for Awful over the intercom by manager first name last name. Jenny caught on real fast and told me to just go get the badge from the office. Awful first name last name must be doing the money drop or something. I pointed out to Jenny that was against company policy. She rolled her eyes and told me that's what Awful first name last name had said to do. Now where was that override badge? I headed up to the office and made a good show of looking for it, called down to Jenny asking if she had it. Nope. Jenny abandoned the big order she was ringing up and came up to the little office to give a cursory look around. This is where the whole story took a turn I hadn't gamed out. See, I was just going to give Mystery a very bad visit with many violations to report. There'd have been an embarrassing reaming from National and possibly even an investigation. Jenny had other plans. Jenny was going nuclear. Jenny apologized to the mystery shopper, but she was going to have to get in Jenny's line now. I couldn't void the transaction or log into 2 registers at once, so I was going to help her pack it up, and Jenny would get to Mystery as soon as she could. Now this is somewhat bullcrap. While true as stated, we all knew how to unplug the registers to get them to reset and log us out. It was a dumb hack, but it worked. The thing was, there was almost zero chance Awful or Mystery knew that. Mystery must have loved her mystery shopping gig because she was the most cheerful, screwed-over customer you ever did see. She smiled, assured us everything was fine, and scribbled in her notebook the whole time. Literally, while I'm loading up Mystery's card at my register, Jenny accidentally rang up a gallon of milk about 6 times. Whoops! No override card, no manager, no head cashier with any power either. Cost-saving cuts there that Awful made early in his days before I arrived. We apologized profusely to the customers, but explained we had no idea where Awful was. Offered to check in the back. Sent a bagger out to check the lot in case Awful was on a smoke break. No joy. As this fiasco rolled on, we had a lot of very unhappy customers on our hands, and the downright giddy Mystery who stayed to the bitter end. We were demanded to call a manager. We tried all Awful's known numbers. Who's above him? Oh, that's regional. We were not allowed to call them. Very strict instructions, true and very against company policy, from manager first name last name, but we can give you their number. The phone's right over there. Many took advantage. We also got yelled at a lot, but despite some sympathy for the customers, we were loving every second of it. Regional took about 2 hours to get somebody down to the store who could clear the registers. Nobody else in the store had permissions on that system. Awful still hadn't shown up. Regional dude overrode the registers, but by then the damage was done. We'd missed the whole lunch rush. No hot food was sold. Our metrics for the day were going to be unbelievably crappy. Regional dude was on the phone frantically trying to figure out how to cover this mess up for his boss, Awful's father, and decided to blame it on a computer outage. I think they intentionally broke some equipment to help sell that story. Awful rolled in after I clocked out, but I'm told Regional dude was still there doing Awful's job. Awful was unbearable for the next couple of days, but I had a foot out the door. Jenny, it turned out, simply didn't care because she'd been doing the work of a head cashier without the pay. It took a few weeks for the fallout to happen, and you bet I kept in touch with Jenny to find out. From this point, I only know what Jenny told me as I was back in college a few states away. A few weeks later, an audit team from National came down to investigate. The mystery shopper story hadn't lined up with the computer outage story, and something was obviously hinky. They dug into the books and found all the labor violations for minors working overtime and too early, late. Interviewed the employees and found out about the scheduling during school time problems. Manager absenteeism, no vacation being allowed. Also that the store was constantly short-staffed. No crap, people ran for the hills as soon as they got anything else. Finally, an assistant manager was on payroll full-time, but nobody had ever seen her work. She clocked in and out within seconds of AM every shift he worked, but was never there. Them dots ain't hard to connect. I don't know if they covered up all the labor violations or not. Probably that would have caused massive fines. I was too young to know to report them. However, Awful, his father, and his mistress all got fired or resigned quietly. The store reportedly went back to being pretty functional after that. Jenny got a better job and left within the year. I never worked retail again. The next one is a petty revenge story. Back in the Stone Age known as the 80s, when Karen was just a pretty name, 8 proto-Karens went out for lunch at an upscale restaurant. They had a wonderful time at their lunch, sending their waitress Mindy scurrying for more of this and a side of that, snapping their fingers for more coffee now. Mindy kept her cool and served them courteously and efficiently, but the Karens were never satisfied and kept asking for more. You know the type. At the end of their 2-hour stay, the ladies' bill came to $200. They paid and then handed Mindy a $5 tip. Mindy stayed calm and handed the tip back. With dignity, she explained, "I can't accept this. It is an insult to my service." Being proto-Karens, of course, they complained to the owner, who fired Mindy on the spot, right there in front of the smirking customers and the whole restaurant. A regular customer, a local executive, was dining there at the time and saw the whole thing unfold. He was livid about how his favorite hard-working server was treated. He did 2 things after that. First, he paid his own bill and assured the owner he would be sharing the story about how Mindy was treated within the local business community. Second, he walked Mindy out and offered her a job. The young exec was my dad, and Mindy ended up working for him for the next 20 years as a trusted lieutenant in his firm. Mom loved her, and Mindy was like an extra grandma to me. The restaurant lost a ton of business. Mindy was well liked, and Dad had, well, still has, a way of getting his messages heard by as many people as possible. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work in a field where urgent response is the entire purpose. My employer became suddenly budget conscious, which led to them becoming much more stringent about our frequent overtime. We were told that all scheduled overtime had to be approved. Cool. No issue there. However, when it came to unscheduled overtime, which is where the bulk of overtime came from, the problem arose. Any unscheduled overtime would be reviewed after the fact. If it was determined that overtime wasn't justified, we could either be faced with being forced to take comp time within the same pay period so that the extra time would be negated, or they would attempt to not pay or claw back money, which is illegal. Cue malicious compliance in 2 ways. I tend to work earlier hours than our main office, so it's not uncommon for me to get phone calls once I've returned home. Normally not a big deal. I handle the call and go about my day. Most times, because it's only a few minutes, I don't even request the overtime pay. This all changed once the policy went into effect. The very first day under the new rules, I received a call from our main office about 10 minutes after I got home. I answered the phone by stating, "Hello, my workday ended 10 minutes ago. Would you like me to continue this call on overtime, or can this be dealt with tomorrow?" The response was, "No overtime, this will only take a minute." I ultimately ended the call and dealt with the issue the following day. This occurred about a half-dozen times over the span of a few days. I really made my point on this one. I received a phone call after hours that I was needed for an urgent, not emergent, I wouldn't have jeopardized anything to make a point response. I listened to the details of what was occurring and informed my supervisor that I'd be happy to get on the road, just as soon as they'd send me an email stating that an after-hours response was required and overtime for the night was authorized. Nothing crazy, just a sentence or 2. The response I got was, "Just get on the road. I'll send you an email later or tomorrow." But I refused. I informed them that I was off duty, and they could either send me the email as requested so I'd be covered, or they could have someone from outside my territory respond in my place, which would have delayed the response over an hour. This back and forth continued for about 4 minutes until they relented and sent me an email, which I received in about 30 seconds, before I'd even had a chance to use the restroom or grab my keys. My points, along with my coworkers who took similar actions, were made. Our leadership only pressed forward with requiring approval for pre-scheduled overtime, and even that has gone by the wayside. The next one is an entitled people story. Next month, I, F, am going away on vacation with a longtime friend, F. We are going to the Caribbean for 5 nights. It is not all-inclusive, so we will be responsible for paying for food, drinks, and any activities. She asked me how much was I bringing in cash. I said $300 cash plus debit and credit cards. She told me she is going to bring $300 cash but no debit or credit cards. She said she is on a budget, and $300 is her limit. I explained that comes around to only $60 per day. This is not one of the cheaper Caribbean islands, so food and drink alone won't leave her with much left over. I reminded her that she needs to factor in cabs, incidentals, or any activities we may decide to do. And you never know if an emergency will come up where she will need money. She says to me, "That is why I have you," and started to laugh. That pissed me off to no end. I tell her that we are both adults who are responsible for our own selves. It would be one thing if she lost her purse and needed money. I would float her money before she even had time to ask. But to purposely use me as her backup ATM is not going to work. I told her now that I know what she is up to. I'm not going to go along with it. If she runs out of money, she will just be assed out and hungry. She needs to bring her cards with her for her own good. She is now telling me I am too harsh, and she will bring extra money, but no cards. I told her to do what she wants, but if there is an emergency, she is on her own. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.